All right. As I said, good afternoon to everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Jack McQuillan from Zero Waste Europe. Just going to give it 1 or 2 more minutes, make sure everyone can join us, and then we'll get started. I see some people are doing it already, so thank you so much. But if you want to just introduce yourself in the chat, let us and let everyone else on the webinar know who you are, where you're from, the organization, and then we'll get started and hear from the first of our 4 speakers today. So we'll give it another 60 seconds or so, probably, and then get going. All right, 2 minutes past. I reckon we can get started. So, good afternoon to everyone. Good morning, good evening, wherever you're joining in the world. Thank you so much for joining our webinar today, looking at how data can and is empowering zero-waste cities throughout Europe. And so this, as you might be aware, but if not, this is just one of our webinars, the Zero Waste Europe Live Semesters, webinars that we organize throughout the year. They happen once a month from October to June, and we cover topics related to zero waste and looking at municipalities, but also much broader, the most relevant, most important topics today. And this is why this one is so interesting, because there's no more sort of more interesting, relevant, and important for us to discuss the use of data. For those that don't know, my name is Jack McQuillan. I'm the Zero Waste Cities Program Coordinator at Zero Waste Europe, and Zero Waste Europe is a Brussels-based NGO. We work on advocacy at the EU level to achieve a zero waste society, but we also, through our network of member organizations, we have 31 members in 27 countries now, we help guide municipalities to implement zero waste strategies at the local and, of course, at the national level. And this is done through the Zero Waste Cities Program. We really help guide communities to transition towards zero waste. And the program itself is a European platform where we try to centralize knowledge, create tools and guidances and resources, basically to help showcase the best practices of zero waste, to bring experts together, to showcase the benefits of what zero waste strategies can do for municipalities and the ease of which they can be implemented in a diverse range of contexts. And this is why we do the webinars, to bring together some of the best and brightest minds in Europe and around the world to discuss some of the most important and interesting topics. And as I said, none more so than today. So let's get started, really. The topic is looking at how zero waste cities can use and be empowered through data. And of course, we live in a world that's increasingly brimming now with data about ourselves, our lifestyles, and the impact this is having on our planet, good or bad, mostly bad. Municipalities in particular, there's a huge volume of potential data that could and should be used to help inform the implementation of local waste reduction and waste prevention strategies. Yet often the sheer volume of data can be overwhelming, or local officials, municipalities don't have the right tools or understanding on how best to capture, analyze, and disseminate the relevant data on crucial and circular economy, sort of crucial waste and circular economy indicators, really. So this webinar, we've got 4 excellent speakers, and we're just going to go into a bit more depth to really understand, okay, what kind of data should municipalities be looking to capture to help inform their decision-making process around implementing zero waste strategies, and how to do this most effectively? What tools and methodologies exist already to support local officials to best capture, analyze, and use data? And of course, how can we improve data accessibility and knowledge to empower not just municipalities, but all of us, the whole community, within the transition towards zero waste? Today, so it's a big topic, basically. Today's webinar, we have 4 excellent speakers. They're going to present for 8 to 10 minutes. And then as usual format, there'll be a specific Q&A with each speaker afterwards for 5 to 7 minutes. And then after each of the 4 speakers have followed that same pattern, bring everyone together to have a broader Q&A at the end. And we'll finish in 85 minutes or so. So regarding the webinar tools, just very quickly, as you've said, there's a chat box. So feel free, please, to introduce yourself and where you're from. Questions are submitted. So at the bottom of your screen, there's also a Q&A box. Please feel free to write your questions in there as the speakers are presenting. And I will relay them to our speakers at the end of the whole webinar or at the end of their presentation if they're specific for them. And as well as those who have joined us on Zoom, we also stream directly to YouTube as well. So if you have watching on YouTube and you have a question, feel free to write it in the chat box, and via the magic of technology, it'll work its way to me and we'll relay it to the speaker. All right, that's enough from me. I'm going to introduce our first speaker and get the show on the road. The first speaker is Jacco Kratz, the Secretary General of Ecologists Without Borders. Jacco is a full-time environmentalist since 2009 and one of the most successful Slovenian environmental NGOs. And so, as I mentioned, Ecologists Without Borders, and it's also the National Zero Waste Organization for Slovenia. Jacco works on various different waste prevention projects, zero waste strategies via the network of zero waste cities in Slovenia, and the historic problem nationally of illegally dumped waste. And Jacco and the organization sort of realized, that passive action wasn't enough, and the organization has since began by organizing massive cleanup projects that activated and engaged 1 in 7 inhabitants in Slovenia. And that since then has really helped grow as an organization and individuals to work much more on waste prevention and to become a leading authority on this nationally. So Jacco, hand the floor over to you.
Thank you. I would like to say that I'm also a big geek in a sense, so open data and practices like this are very important to our work. But I will focus in my presentation on the question more on data gaps and the accessibility itself. So, of course, the basic waste management data is available everywhere. The waste managers have it, and it's great data, even though it's just summary statistics. A lot of value can be extracted from there. And then in the zero waste movement, we do another basic layer, which is looking at the waste composition of the residual waste. I think we promote this enough that I don't need to go into the details, but it can provide a lot of background and impetus to work on specific issues to reduce and better manage waste. So it is a data gap because it's not available everywhere, but it is easily done. This analysis is simple, cost effective, and really simple to do, so no excuse. But when it comes to greater potential, I think the bigger data gaps are when we look at the whole, let's say, supply chain, for the lack of a better word. So looking both upstream and downstream of our waste. Downstream in the sense that we don't really know a lot of the time what's happening with our waste, because in many countries, including Slovenia, we have extended producer responsibility systems deployed in such a opaque way that even they don't really know what happens with the waste that they process later. So information gets lost, and while people don't understand what's exactly happening with the waste, some clear and painful issues are still hidden. Trash blindness continues, and we're not as effective as we could be. So transparency downstream, very important, but also upstream can be really helpful. And by upstream, I mean, of course, when we collect waste, we have the overall data about, let's say, e-waste generation or food waste generation or textile waste generation. But, that's a single monolithic number, and that's not so useful. So if we divide and conquer upstream by looking at temporal or spatial sources and splitting it into smaller problems, it's much easier to derive value and derive action from this data. So I think this is a big data gap, and it will improve as transpositions come into force, but clearly I think we have a great lack here. Now, smaller gaps, spatial data, I haven't seen it any time at all. I know at least bigger waste managers have their own business intelligence systems and their own logistical planning that's connected to geographical information systems, but most of that is not really useful for the general public anyway. But even things like water fountain locations are often not well specified or not even georeferenced. And of course, another thing that often is missing but is addressed when writing strategies for cities is getting a pulse of the community activity. So what are the initiatives at the individual, organizational, or business level that are going on that might help our journey towards zero waste, but also what are the initiatives that might need our data to, improve their impact. So also something to map. But I would say that pragmatically, we always need to think, what do we actually want to do with data? Because as data geeks, and like Jack said, we can gather tons and tons of data. We have Internet of Things, we have sensors everywhere, but if we don't know what we need it for, what we'll use it for, does it really make any sense? I would say that partially it makes sense, because it's not just about you making sense of the data. The data economy and this transparency is about allowing others to derive value from your data, even if you can't. And data is the thing that elucidates problems, and elucidated problems just attract solutions, even if we're not the one providing the solution, right? So I would say keep it simple, don't gather too much, but still maybe someone else can do something great with the rest. But also I'm promoting this keep it simple principle because many municipalities around Europe are just too small to have full data management systems, to have open platforms for access like CCAN and stuff like that. So if you want Europe itself to transition, we have to have solutions and methodologies that are appropriate for all scales, basically. And like I said, higher granularity means more data, but it can be really useful to be able to pinpoint the pain points. And yeah, sure, we can gather a lot of data, but generate dashboards, tables, graphs, visualizations that are cool, but if there's no impact at the end, what's the point? And to drive this point forward, I would say that it's not just an academic question, because digital waste has a physical component. Data waste is prevalent and we have a data explosion going on. But at the end of the day, if data is not used, it's wasting space. And at certain point, you need another disk. At certain point, you need another rack, another server, another data center. And all this has a tangible impact on our system. For example, the IT sector is prognosed by 2040 to more than double its energy use and have more than 14% share in the global use. So clearly we have a digital pandemic also going on, and data is part of it. Right, when it comes to accessibility, I'm a great proponent of open philosophies, and open data is the clear winner here when we want greater accessibility, because on one sense, it clarifies the legal side of things, what you can do with the data. And I'm sure everyone is familiar with the Creative Commons licenses, but we also have open data common licenses specifically for data itself that make it clear whether you can use it, what you can use it for, how you can use it, whether you should redistribute it the same way. And very importantly as well for accessibility, open standards when it comes to really technical stuff, or when it comes to formats, data formats that we use, or file formats that we use. Because if we want data to be truly accessible, we want it to be accessible from any machine, anywhere, regardless of software choice. And having open formats that are easily readable is also great when we want to deal with this same data maybe 20 or 50 years in the future, because if it's a well-documented format, it means that it will be accessible without needing to do software archaeology, basically. And as a data user and provider, also have to keep in mind that quality assurance is something that we should do more often, because kind of a public secret is that we have a lot of problems with poor quality data, and it's terrible. So we can do a lot as providers of data, as cities, to provide better data, so not every user has to clean it again, make sure that the dates are consistent, that let's say the notation for floating point numbers is consistent and stuff like that. But we have plenty of solutions for that as well. We have initiatives like frictionless data from Open Knowledge Foundation and others that are there to help clean things up, help ensure processes already generate good data so we can save time. And then, of course, the general stuff about increasing accessibility. I would mention stability in three senses: stability of our infrastructure, so data is readily available; stability in our technology, so the formats and specifications don't change too much. Otherwise, again, we're causing friction to the users. And probably most importantly, stability in our methodologies. So our data can be comparable in the temporal sense and can be comparable maybe to other data sets. But yeah, in general, I would say all these things that are there for increasing accessibility immediately improve also the value of the data and making it easier to get something out of it. But finally, I would just like to reiterate a point on transparency. I mentioned it for open data, but transparency is not just here for that and to prove the legitimacy of our work, because the environmental work is always being questioned, and it's a great tool in a sense, transparency, to show that we're doing what we're saying. But I would say that transparency is paramount here just to allow this data ecosystem to function, because transparency and data is what allows that people can come together, communities come together, co-create solutions, and really strive for a zero-waste circular economy at the local level. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Jaka. That's hugely appreciated. And I think a really useful scene setter for the rest of this webinar in terms of the key principles and some of the main foundations of what we're talking about. A couple of questions. Yeah, so basically a reminder actually to all the participants, if you have a question for Jaka or for other speakers, please type it in the Q&A box. And I think there's a question here, I'm not actually specifically, but from Delhi about harmonizing data. And I think, so Jaka, maybe, obviously you work with a network of zero-waste cities in Slovenia, but getting a bit down to the micro level, when you work with these cities, how do you help them collect and sort of support them on their journey to better analyzing and understanding data, and how to sort of harmonize this nationally, I suppose? It's quite a big question with lots of different facets, but.
Well, the thing is that with the basic statistics that are the most powerful, we have nationally defined processes for how this data should be gathered and presented. So we don't have a harmonization problem there. The more exotic stuff you want, the more you need to be careful, and the more this becomes a problem. But this is more, I guess, a problem when you have to mix sources of data, not so much basically getting it from the same stream, because this is just a different operator we provide through the same methodology, the same data. So it's rarely a question of is this comparable or not.
And in Slovenia, how many sources of data are you having to sort of bring in with your work with municipalities? You mentioned EPR companies, for example, there.
Yeah, EPR companies are a nightmare currently because they don't want to provide data on treatment, and when they do, it's sometimes nonsensical. I like to mention that we asked twice through municipalities asking, basically, and some EPR schemes said that they burn 40% of the glass they process, which doesn't make physical sense, let alone economical. So, you know, it immediately disqualifies all the rest of the data that they provide. So we don't have this transparency in place, but this is more telling of our EPR system, not so much the concept, because we would like to have traceability throughout the chain, right? Because once you know where things end up, you can really see where the pain points through the process are. Otherwise, we keep having these useless academic discussions. But yeah.
And then a final question about that. So yes, ideally there is traceability for the system, but in a lot of countries, I imagine it's a similar situation to what you mentioned in terms of companies, either waste companies or sort of producer responsibility organizations, less willing to share data, and the data they share, you might question as well. I don't know, guidance would you give to people listening to this saying, okay, we're trying to help a municipality, or we work for a municipality, but the data we're getting, we're unsure about. How can they sort of, what first steps could you recommend to get a better understanding of the data that's important to them locally, and maybe how could they sort of verify the data that they're getting perhaps?
Well, I would say first that cities can really be champions when it comes to this. A city, especially a big city, always has more push, more power than maybe a local initiative or a business to push for DPR system to provide data, or DPR systems, because it's not just one. So I wouldn't just throw in the towel. But when it comes to verification, well, usually we do this through combining different data sources, cross-checking, having redundancy inbuilt into the methodology. But when data is in a data silo and you have no other information, that doesn't help you. So I think this is more of an advocacy problem than just convincing someone, okay, can you at least get us the data under a non-disclosure agreement or get us some summary statistics, so it's not even, we can't even see any business secrets from that or things like this. So you can go part way to their side, but I think it has historically been a hard problem for us.
Yeah, and for many others, I imagine, on this call. So yeah, great. Thanks so much, Jaka. Stay obviously on the call, and we'll bring you back towards the end for a general Q&A, but thank you so much for kicking us off. We're going to move on now to our second speaker, Aristide Athanasiadis. Sorry, Aris, that's probably a horrible pronunciation, but Aris is a senior scientist at the Lausanne Federal Polytechnic School and is a co-founder of the non-profit organization Metabolism of Cities, which is a global network of people working together on systemically reducing their net environmental impacts of cities and territories in a socially just manner and in a context-specific way. And from 2018, 2020, Aris was also the chair of the Circular Economy and Urban Metabolism at the University Libre de Bruxelles here in Brussels, of course, and he has carried out and or supervised material flow analysis and urban metabolism studies of over 15 cities around the world. And further to this, Aris is also the host of the Circular Metabolism podcast, which you can find on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, and is the most listened and viewed podcast on urban metabolism and circular cities today. So Aris, we're super grateful and lucky to have you. Thanks so much. See you sharing your screen already, and yeah, I hand the virtual floor over to you.
Thanks, Jack. And also for introducing already the topic. There are many things that you have covered that I can go a bit more quickly on them. And one of them is, you mentioned the downstream and upstream challenges of waste. And I think for us, at least in Metabolism of Cities and in my work, we work around a central concept or let's say discipline that is called urban metabolism. And this discipline or concept really is a living system and an urban system in the way that in order to live, we require resources, we metabolize them, we consume them, and then we produce waste out of this activity. So it is a lot about data, consumption data, entering, exiting cities, but also are stored or manufactured or consumed within the cities. And so in that sense, our work helps us to develop a lot of insights or data-driven insights. And some of these insights are these, as we call them, material flow analysis, or these urban metabolism studies. This is for the case of Brussels, where you just have a look of all of the flows entering and exiting your cities. And there you see on the right, the bottom right, you have waste that exists. This is solid waste, but you of course have also wastewater, and you have something else, which is a waste, which are greenhouse gas emissions. So instead of looking at waste as just the outflow, we see it as a systemic perspective. Where does it come from? What was it before it became waste, and all of that. This is for another study here in Switzerland where we're looking at this. And then also what urban metabolism studies and material flow analysis do is that they enable you to do both the direct and indirect assessments of flows. So not only what happens in your territory, but also, for one bit of energy or of materials that we consume here, it was in Brussels, there is 3 to 4 times more that is consumed somewhere else. So when we talk about waste, of course, there is the local waste that is produced, but also the waste that we produce somewhere else. And this type of studies look also the global hinterland, be it of waste, which can be in form of extraction waste, which can be in form of manufacturing waste, which can be in form of logistic waste. And once again, once we collect them locally in our cities, we very often export them to other places to be at best recycled, at worst being dumped. And finally, one of the other elements that urban metabolism focus on is what we call the stocks. So, which are materials that stay in our city for more than a year. In that sense, whatever is behind me, whatever is around you, are materials that stay within cities or urban systems for more than a year. And depending on if we consider them as resources, they can be future resources, or if we don't plan anything about it, they're going to end up as waste. And of course, these add up to a lot of tons in each city. So you see here, for instance, a study we did for the city of Melbourne, how much it weighs and what different types of materials are, but also what are the embodied energy flows, greenhouse gas emission flows, embodied water flows, etc., etc. So just for you to get a sense, 1 square kilometer of a city, in order to build it from scratch, at least the city of Melbourne, these are the numbers that it requires. So we're talking about 1 million, 1.5 million tons per square kilometers. We're talking about that big amounts of gigajoules, cubic meters of water, and CO2 equivalents. Now, let me go back to Metabolism of Cities, which is our nonprofit. As Jack mentioned it, it exists now for many years. And the essence of it is that we're an online collective of people that work together to accelerate the implementation of urban metabolism thinking in policy and practice. And how do we do it? We do it mainly through our open source website. So we have a number of projects, but we mainly focus on creating knowledge of urban metabolism, sharing it around, and applying it in cities. And we do that through our community-based website. And that means that we really try to create an interface between stakeholders that do not often talk. So academics often stay within the academic bubble. Policymakers often do not communicate with them, and also practitioners that actually do things on the ground are often excluded from that discussion. And so one of the things that we do within this website is to gather all of the studies that exist on urban metabolism. You see here how many have been done, and we have listed them also in different formats. But we also have these data dashboards, or this urban metabolism dashboards for cities. And we have them for 90 plus cities across the world. That adds up to approximately 2,000 data sets, 900 maps, and there is more than 200 people that collaborate and contribute to actually add these data sets online. So to do that, we have created online courses where people know how to upload stuff. They also know what is urban metabolism, and then we co-create together this public good, let's say, of flows of cities. Now, it's not only waste flows, but it's also energy flows, water flows, and many other stuff. And here is, for instance, the case of Geneva. You see some electricity consumption, or you see, for instance, where is waste, some waste collection points, or where do we extract gravel and sand within Geneva, and therefore where do we create some of the waste over there. Another project I would like to discuss is Sizzle Loops. So we're part of a European H2020 project called Sizzle Loops that focus on measuring, but also closing the loops of bio-waste and of construction and demolition materials. And we have one of our partners from Porto here, Helder, I saw in the participants. Hi, Helder. And our role in this project is actually to assess, to develop a method that can be transposed to any city in Europe about how circular the construction sector is and the biomass sector is, and then the whole city. So we were just now finished the biomass and construction sector circularity assessment of 7 cities. We also created online courses for these cities to do it on their own. We have a method that is, all of this is available. You can see here on the slides, and they themselves created their dashboards once again. This is a city in Finland that did their own assessment of biomaterials, or some land extraction sites and waste collecting and treatment sites, and that leaves them. They self-create a small report that is online, and they have their own the right, the flows, and you see how circularity is just this tiny blue flow at the very bottom, this light blue, and we see how cities are, of course, not at all circular today, but there is still a lot of hope that we can move towards it. Finally, a last project that I want to share with you is it's called Platform U, and it's a matchmaking platform that we've created where businesses can exchange material flows one to another. So the waste of one company could become a resource of another. And so it's a matchmaking of a sort, but we don't only focus on matchmaking resources, so flows, but also spaces, underused technology that can be equipment and all of that. And so we can think about zero waste, not only about material flows, but also of underused spaces, underused technologies, underused equipment, etc., etc. And just you see here some examples we had in Brussels. Just to finish, as Jack mentioned, we also have created this Circular Metabolism podcast where we interview thinkers, researchers, policymakers, and practitioners on the topics of circular economy and circular cities. So if you're interested, you can find it online wherever you get your podcasts. And finally, we have created a number of online courses, free online courses, for you to learn a bit more about what is urban metabolism, but also the link between data and urban metabolism. So I think that's it. Yes, that's it. Yeah, if you have any questions, I would happily answer them.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Aristide. That's fantastic. Super interesting to sort of understand a bit more about the concept of urban metabolism and how you're putting it into practice across Europe. And yeah, as Aristide, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box, of course, straight away, and we'll get through them. But I'm going to use my moderator privilege here, and Aris, ask you a question. Because you have European cities that you work with, is there, what is required basically of a city, okay, and or a municipality of any size to say we want to better understand and map out the flow of materials and to get a sense of our urban metabolism? Is there certain requirements or like a basic level of information or data or resources that they need for this to happen, or can it be done anywhere?
Can it be done anywhere? You mean elsewhere in the world, or what do you mean?
In terms of in Europe, but like size, sort of a city, or sort of the investment needed, perhaps?
Yeah. So, of course, that's a great question, but I'll kind of reframe it into, it depends on what you want to do with it. Mm-hmm. So you can use an urban metabolism study as a status quo, like where are we today? And therefore, if we have a plan of, let's say, reducing by X amount, at least you know what's happening today. Or you can use it as a way to have your, to launch your circularity roadmap. And therefore, you want to identify which are some of the actors behind of some of the flows and all of that. So the granularity depends on how you're going to use it. And therefore, the amount of information and time and data infrastructure will vary very, very much. Now, you can do one urban metabolism study very fast by, downscaling, upscaling stuff, and it's a very rough start. At least you get a sense, and then you can progress into something much more detailed as you go as well.
Brilliant. And this kind of sort of this range of scales, you mentioned your online courses, they provide this kind of support and guidance for the people who want to get started on this, perhaps?
Yeah, correct. So we tell them we call them by layers. So you have like a layer of, what's your context, how many people are living there, what are the common economic activities, but also what is the infrastructure, like do you have waste treatment plants and all of that, and then what are the stocks and your flows. And for each of the layers, we explain what it is, we explain where do you get data, and if you don't find data, what are some tips and tricks to do, to come around this.
Fantastic, amazing. And then final question. If you were speaking to someone from a city that you worked with, or someone you want to work with, how would you sell in 30 or 45 seconds? What is the purpose of such a study, to understand urban metabolism? What benefits would it bring to a municipality?
Well, it's to avoid costs, I would say, because now cities have many plans and they invest a lot of money on it, but oftentimes they don't know what are the results and what do they yield. Without knowing where they are today and without knowing whether each euro or whatever dollar has an impact on it, it's just as if they burn money. And if they're having multiple plans that have actually systemic results, perhaps you can spend much less and have much more impact. So without knowing systemically what is happening in your city, you're navigating blindly. At least that's my view.
Absolutely, yeah, it's a really good point to end on. Aris, thank you so much for the presentation. Yes, please, if you have questions from the participants to Aris, please put them in the Q&A box and we'll get around to them at the end. But we're going to move on to our third speaker out of four. And this is Leona Silberstein, who's an environmental inspector at the city of Helsinki in Finland. And Leona's main task in her work is to promote circular economy within the capital of Finland. And she was in charge of the creation of the city's roadmap for circular and sharing economy in 2020 and is now coordinating its implementation. Leona also contributes to various circular economy projects, and her passion lies in really ensuring getting the world to becoming more circular and how to transform sustainability into the new normal. As part of this, Leona's work is also focused a lot in leading and training cities' employees on climate issues and, of course, circular economy. So we're super excited and grateful to have Leona join. And Leona, I invite you to share your screen.
Thank you very much. And good afternoon, everybody. It's nice to be here. Let me just get my presentation. I hope you can see it now.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for the presentation. Indeed, I'm working in the city of Helsinki in the environmental services, and one of my core tasks is the coordination of the implementation of our roadmap for circular and sharing economy. It was adopted in 2020 as part of our current carbon neutral Helsinki 2035 action plan. The roadmap has 4 focus areas: construction, procurement, green waste, and sharing economy. They all have defined circular economy goals for the year 2035. And to achieve these goals, the roadmap contains altogether 31 actions. Here's an example of what kind of actions we have there. We have tried to make them as concrete as possible. And for every action, we have defined the responsible parties within the city organization and also schedules for every action. Like I said, this roadmap is a part of our Carbon Neutral Helsinki 2035 action plan, and this carbon neutral plan has its own monitoring tool called the Climate Watch. So it was pretty obvious to us that we would want to have a similar tool for monitoring the actions in the roadmap, and this is what we have been created. And I will try to show it to you. I'll open the web page so you can see. Here, I hope you see it now. I'm sorry, it's only in Finnish, but I will try to talk you through it. It's called Kiertotalousvahti, which translates approximately Circularity Watch. So here are sections that are telling you what circular economy is. Here is some information about our roadmap and about this monitoring tool. And if you click here, you can find a list of all the 31 actions that we have in the roadmap. They are listed here in number order and also according to themes. And if I click one action, it opens up a page. So each one of the actions in the roadmap has its own page where we have tried to elaborate what the action is about, what we are trying to achieve with this action, why it is important. Also, we have listed the responsible parties to promote this action. You can find them there. And here we have defined for every action concrete, detailed, and scheduled tasks. These are concrete steps with which we are actually taking forward the actions. And every action also has one or several contact people whose job it is to keep this page updated. Whenever, as the action is proceeding and going along, the contact people have to come here and update this page so that it is all the time on top of things. So this is a public web page. You can Google it, Kiertotalousvahti, and anyone can come and see what we are doing. Now I'll try to get back to my presentation. I hope you see it here. So there are several benefits of the service, to my opinion. First of all, this enables real-time monitoring of the actions because we have these scheduled tasks there in the Circularity Watch. The system sends reminder emails to the contact people whenever a deadline for a specific task is coming closer. So this kind of helps us not to forget to do things and to keep the page updated. We do yearly environmental reporting to the city government, and circular economy is one of the themes in the reporting. So with the help of this Circularity Watch, I can easily gather every year information to this yearly environmental reporting. The Circularity Watch also acts as an information basis for updating the roadmap because we need to update it every once in a while to keep the actions topical. And last but not least, the system is public. This adds transparency to the city's work because anybody can see what we are doing. It also puts pressure on the responsible parties and the contact people to do their job. And it also gives information to companies and to other actors about what we are doing, what is currently happening in the city, what are our goals, what are our challenges, what are we up to. And we are also showing example to other municipalities. To complete, I have gathered some points or some challenges that need to be taken into account when building this kind of system. How to manage the whole picture. First of all, you need to invest time. The bigger the action plan is, or the roadmap or the program, the more actions you have in it, the more time and work you need to invest. It takes a lot of effort to kick off the actions, to build up the follow-up website, to find and train all the contact people, etc. Also, if you have a big organization, a complicated organization like we have in Helsinki, it is very difficult to get organized. How to get the right people who are in charge of leading a certain action, how to get the contact people, who nominates the contact people, what do I do if something is not proceeding? I'm not a boss, I cannot give orders to anyone. So it is helpful if you have a cross-sectoral steering group to support you, to make the decisions, to nominate the right people, to get things done. And one thing that I have been pondering about lately is how to motivate people. Our people have a lot on their plates, and updating a web page is not the first priority for anyone. And this is especially with this COVID, everybody staying at home at the moment, so it's not actually helping. And this is something I have been thinking about. Maybe we should do this environmental reporting probably more often, because this would put pressure on people to keep active. Maybe we should be rewarding active contact people somehow. One dream that I have is that I would, in the future, like to add some kind of additional function in this web page of a more interactive function where people could, anyone, companies, citizens, research institutes, everybody could just come and make comments and have discussions there and take part in our work. This might also help activate the city personnel in this work. But this is something for the future. It remains to be seen how we will develop the system further. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Leona. That's really interesting and fabulous to hear about the work of Helsinki and how you're sort of bringing a much wider community on board for your sort of transition to the circular economy. So thank you for sharing. I have some questions as well, just about, you mentioned a lot here. Users, contact points need to update their page on the website. When they do so, it'd be interesting to learn a bit more about what information is actually required to when they're updating the website. Is it sort of quantitative or more of a qualitative narrative kind of sort of update, or a bit of both?
Well, maybe mostly it's qualitative. It's words. You have to elaborate what we're doing. If we're, for example, piloting circular economy criteria in a construction project somewhere, then you have to write this down and open it up on the web page so that people understand what we are doing. It's mostly like that. But we do also have created indicators for different actions to measure how they are proceeding. So this is another thing that they will have to be reporting every year. Not all of the actions have indicators yet because it's very complicated, but we are working on it. So this is another thing. Yeah. So kind of both.
And yeah, it's fascinating. How much sort of interaction has the website produced so far? Would you, I don't know if you have numbers or just a general reflection from yourself, perhaps?
We don't have any interactive part in the website yet. This is something that we have been talking about, maybe creating in the future. So this is not existing yet. But other than that, we have had some contacts from different companies, for example, regarding some specific actions and information what we're doing there. But I would like to see more.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting. But it's a challenge that is very common when you mentioned about motivating people, especially during these times in particular. So yeah, I imagine a lot of people share that, share your thoughts, but it's very useful to hear how you've broken it down in those 3 sections. And then we have a question from Gisela Sommer about, yeah, again, mentions very interesting, but are the people who manage the website also responsible for implementing some of the actions, or is it sort of, does it differ at all? How, I guess the question is, what does the relationship between those who manage the website and responsible for execution and the wider stakeholder pool you work with?
Yeah, the contact people do represent the parties who are responsible for actually progress or implementing the action. So we pick up some people from the responsible parties who know what is happening there and who are participating in the action. So they are the contact people. One or more, depending on how many parties they are in this action who are responsible for putting it forward.
Brilliant. And then maybe a final question. The circular economy roadmap and the plan for Helsinki. I don't know if you could share a couple of sort of details about that. From the plan that you have, what are the biggest sort of priorities or focus areas within the circular economy so broad? The city itself of Helsinki, are the main focus areas that for you are the main priorities and the things you need to work on at the moment?
I would probably say construction, because Helsinki is a growing city. We're building a lot, we're also demolishing a lot. So this is something we need to work on more, especially in housing production. There, we're at the starting point with regards to circular economy. So we are yet to find the right kind of solution. We need to do a lot. Yeah.
And very last question before we move on is, I'm fascinated, how was the reaction in terms of when you first introduced this, from politically or from the wider sort of stakeholder pool? Has there been interest, acceptance in this, or is it a continuously fighting sort of a tough challenge to get people not only updating the website, but at least at the start interested in this topic, I suppose?
I think it had a very good reception, at least politically. The decision makers in Helsinki welcomed the roadmap and said that it's about time we have a paper like this. So generally, I would say that the attitudes are very positive. It's more of a question of resources and time with people, not about wanting to do things.
Yeah, understandable. All right, brilliant. Leona, thank you so much for presenting and answering the questions. We're going to move on to our 4th and final speaker, and then we'll bring all the speakers back for a Q&A at the end. But yes, I'm going to introduce our 4th speaker. Arnold Saber is the co-founder and CEO of GeoFluxus, and as a program developer, Circularity in Urban Regions at the Amsterdam Institute for Advanced Metropolitan Solutions, which is a collaboration between MIT, TU Delft, and the Wageningen, University. Pronounced that horribly wrong, but yes, it's Arnold's sort of background is in urban planning as well, and in architecture, and he's worked on some of the largest sort of infrastructural projects around the world in places like Singapore, Zurich, and Antwerp. And together with the fellow co-founder and CTO of GeoFluxus, Rusner Zidderit, Arnold spearheads the development of GeoFluxus, as I mentioned, which is an open source platform that maps, analyzes, and predicts how materials move throughout cities. And in 2020, the company won the prize by the European Commission as the most promising platform to deliver the EU Green Deal. And currently, Arno is finishing his PhD at Delft University of Technology in the chair of Environmental Technology and Design. So, Arno, I hand the floor to you and ask you if you can share your screen.
Yes, thanks so much for the introduction, Jack, and also very nice to be allowed to finish off this great scala of speakers of different backgrounds and stories. So thanks so much for that. I hope you can all see my screen. So indeed, my name is Arnold Saber. I'm currently a PhD researcher at TU Delft. And based off our work at TU Delft and the AMS Institute, we recently founded a spin-off company, a spin-off project called GeoFluxus. We're currently a team of 7 people, basically working on an almost rhetorical question of where do materials come from and where do materials go to after we discard them. As you can see, we try to answer this question by basically doing a first couple of mapping exercises, mapping experiments, trying to visualize where do waste materials occur and what happens with them after we discard them. This is an example, first example that we did for the city of Amsterdam in 2018. Where basically every line you see is the movement of a waste material from where it is being produced. So a certain construction site or a certain textile waste garbage can to where it is being treated or where it is being processed. The data is anonymized right now for the purpose of the demo of the video, but we basically have this on an individual street address level or on an individual company address level. We build a whole platform around this. So you can basically look for certain materials, for certain material characteristics. So are you looking for clean materials, mixed or non-mixed materials, and so forth. So you basically know about every material, every waste material that is going around in your city and what is happening with it down the line. This was the start of the whole story. This was the start of GeoFluxus, where we basically are using different advanced data analytical algorithms to combine different data sets together. And I think that's something that has been mentioned already in the previous presentations as well by Aristide, by Jaka, where there's basically not one central or one common database or something where all things materials are being collected and are being reported. No, just like very often the case with governments and with especially here in Europe, things are very dispersed. Things are very much dispersed among different institutions and governmental bodies. And the trick is, or the beauty arises when you make these different governmental departments or when you make these different data sources talk with each other. And so that's exactly what we did. We basically built an ontology, which is a new way of combining data and of how data can start talking with each other. We built an ontology that is basically able to clean up different data sources that have to do with materials. So we're talking about customs data, we're talking about waste data, Chamber of Commerce data, geospatial data, LCA data, and so forth. I could keep on going on. And we basically bring them all together in the GeoFluxus platform, which is then able to exactly show what I showed you on the previous slide, show on a map visually, spatially, where do waste materials come from and where do waste materials go to. I think I have time for a quick demo of the platform. Jack only gave me 10 minutes, but I will secretly go beyond that if nobody says anything. And so this is how the platform looks like. So as Jack said already, it's an open source platform. So the whole code behind this is publicly available. And you can basically go here to the analyze section and then basically look for any city or for every region or province currently in the Netherlands, but we're expanding to other countries as well, where waste materials occur, what happens with waste materials in your area. The system consists out of two parts. The first part is basically, let's go a bit slow. The first part is basically filtering down the waste flows. So what are you specifically looking for? Because as you can imagine, it's a huge bulk of data. It's a huge bulk of information that you need to browse through. So like, are you interested in a specific origin? So like in a specific company that is producing waste or in a specific area, for example? Are you interested in a specific destination? So I want to see all waste from Brussels going to China, for example. That's something that you can select over here. And then in the flow section, you can go even one step deeper in terms of the materials. So are you interested in a specific EWC code, which is this European waste catalog system about waste materials, hazardous materials, specific types of materials or products or composites, specific characteristics of the materials. This is basically all part of our self-developed ontological system. You can look for example, I'm only interested in clean, not mixed organic materials, for example. And then you can basically select whatever that you're interested in. And then look for these things on maps, in bar charts, and so forth, to then, in the end, get to, for example, here a map of all wood waste streams in the city of Amsterdam and what happens with them. What we did after having developed this for the city of Amsterdam is, of course, look if this is also possible in other European countries. And luckily, it is. We did pilot cases in over 11 different urban regions across 9 different countries in the EU. So you see Maribor in Slovenia, you see Hamburg in Germany, you see the region around the Basque region in Spain, Ghent in Belgium, to basically validate that this is something which could be applicable for the whole EU. And what we saw after cross-comparing all these different cities next to each other is that there were a couple of very interesting commonalities between all those different cities. And so one of them is that actually 89% of all waste comes from companies and only 11% is household waste. Whereas what we see in policies, national policies or urban policies about waste is that the focus is very much on us as consumers, on us as citizens. We don't get a plastic bag in the supermarket anymore. We don't get a straw in our cocktail drink in the bar anymore. But what we see where really the problem lays, where the bulk of waste is being produced, is really at the company level, at company waste. Furthermore, what we see, thanks to this reclassification model that we developed, is that we actually currently see that 22% of all waste in the city of Amsterdam is directly reusable by another party, which means that there's no extra intermediary step necessary anymore. And so there's no extra recycling step or an extra whatever step, processing step necessary anymore. 22%, which is a huge amount, can be immediately reused as a product, as a material by another party. Going further, even on this 89-11% example that I gave before, so 89% of all waste comes from companies. But what we furthermore see down the line is that 70% of all waste is produced by only 7% of all the companies. So you see that there's like a small amount of companies that are really responsible for the bulk of all the waste being produced. So then, you know, as a government, okay, these are the 20-something companies for the city of Amsterdam. The 7% amounted to about 20 companies. Those 7% of all companies, those are the ones that I need to go and sit around the table with to make the biggest impact. And then finally, saying something about waste and how far it often travels. Aristide also had a beautiful map about this, is that we see that waste often travels very far distances for very low value processing. So that's by keeping your waste materials local, you also keep your financial flows local, and you also support and strengthen your local economy. So that's also something that we try to show and try to visualize through our platform. But as already mentioned before, and I think this is nothing new, if you want to transition towards a circular economy and a circular cities, waste is really not a problem. We really need to be able to say something about the full value chain, full material chain of where our materials come from, how do we produce our products, by which economic activities are these products manufactured, and then how do they eventually end up as being waste, which we need to avoid in the first place. And so that's the most recent evolution within the R&D at GeoFluxes, is that we're basically trying to also backcast into the material chain. So if we know on a very granular level about waste, where it occurs, by whom it is being produced, and so forth, how can we then backcast to which economic activities, to which products preceded those waste materials, and which raw materials are parts of those products? And so that's something that we're currently doing. In line with the current way of thinking about the circular economy in most governmental documents, that we basically are also right now able to visualize where the raw materials, where the critical raw materials come from that are currently being used in Amsterdam and then eventually end up as being waste. So this is the first example of what you see of where the raw materials come from that end up eventually as being thrown away as waste in the city of Amsterdam. So all of a sudden you get this idea of the scale of not the urban metabolism, as Aristide was talking about, but the planetary metabolism of our daily consumption patterns. And I think that's I think that's a very interesting thing to keep on working on. Secondly, and I think that's also something that Jaka already mentioned in his presentation, is it's not a level equal playing field. By being able to show through data where materials occur, where waste materials occur, where the biggest impact is made, you know also as a government or as a policymaker where to put your efforts. And that's you don't have to focus on everything. This is an example. The environmental impact due to the local processing of waste materials in Amsterdam. But if you focus on those 5 waste materials, which you see here on the right of the pie chart, you basically already reduce 50% of all the impact being made. So through data, you can really pinpoint on where the action needs to be taken first. And then finally, also something which I already mentioned before, and that's how I'm going to end the presentation as well, is by being able to show where waste materials occur and what happens with them, you also can start doing something with it. And it's also something that was already mentioned in the previous presentations. So this is an example of the first 100% circular window frames in the world that were made thanks to the visualization and the making the waste data transparent. So it's basically us as GeoFluxes working together with a local contractor in Amsterdam. This local contractor had to renovate those 2 social housing blocks here on the right. And he basically asked us, okay, which waste materials are available here in the surroundings that we could do something with. And so we found an incredible amount of wood class A, so the best class or the best, best quality of wood that was going to the incinerator basically. So he basically brought together that company that was producing that wooden waste and bringing it to the incinerator with the contractor. They sat together, and then a couple of months later, you see here what the result was: a beautiful window frame made out of 100% discarded wood, and also the glass planes of the windows were also reused. And so that's also where we see the future of GeoFluxes as a company. Is if we know that the real impact is made at the company level and the big amounts of waste are being made at the company level, how can we convince and how can we inform companies that actually there is something to do with their waste materials? And so this is a last kind of teaser that I would like to show you guys. Where basically we're making a platform for companies called the Waste Profile, where you can log in, where a company gets the overview of all the waste materials that it has produced. an overview of the impact the company makes through transportation and through the treatment of the company's waste materials. And we also have a benchmarking tool. So how well does a company score in comparison with companies in the same economic sector? So are they doing better? Are they doing worse? And then that we show them circular alternatives. So which companies are in their vicinity that basically do something better, one higher value on the R ladder processing step than the status quo. And then we basically introduce those companies to each other and basically hope that then the best comes out of it. Yeah, thanks a lot for your attention. Thanks a lot for this extremely interesting afternoon. And yeah, let's make the world less linear. Thanks a lot.
Oh no, thank you so much. That's hugely interesting. And I think it's a real, yeah, sort of amazing achievement, what you've done and what you've created with GeoFluxus. It's, yeah, I mean, so many questions that come to mind for me, but around just the participants, please put your questions in the chat. There are some already there for you, Arno, but yeah, the first question is, how do you get access to this volume of data? Like who like the people you need to get access from? How have you found this? And sort of, there was a question about here about confidentiality as well, particularly some of the data that ends up outside of the Netherlands in the case of Amsterdam.
Yeah. So first of all, there's an EU regulation that requires EU member states to report to the EU on a yearly basis certain information with regards to waste. That's also something that Jacques already referred to. But so these typical, yeah, ugly pie charts that you find in EU reports, like, okay, 67% of all waste in Poland this year got recycled. That's kind of generally what you find also on Eurostat and so forth. And so what we started doing is basically trying to find out how they know that 67% of all waste in Poland got recycled that year. And so what we found is that there's very often within, so I'm talking specifically about EU member states. I don't know how it happens in non-EU countries. That's a whole different discussion, unfortunately. But so what we found out, how governments know that 67% of all waste in Poland got recycled, is that there's basically for companies that produce or treat more than a certain amount of waste per year, a mandatory reporting obligation that states, okay, on Tuesday, the 6th of January, this amount of this type of waste got transported from place A to place B, and at place B, it got landfilled or it got recycled and so forth. And so those individual company reports, which are indeed, what was said already before, extremely difficult to get by and are very often, yeah, so I know in the Netherlands, very few people knew about it as soon as, until we found out about it, and then it kind of got used more. But it's really all about finding the right person. Very often within the Ministry of Environment, we see that's very often collected there somewhere. Finding the right people who know about this data and who are willing to collaborate and who are willing to also think along in, okay, yeah, this waste data could also serve for something more than eventually ending up in some kind of ugly pie chart that nobody has any interest in. So that's it in short. It's a lot of, I mean, so there's 4 years of PhD research preceding all of this. So it's a lot of fishing, calling, stalking, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, it's an amazing achievement, and I think this is one of the issues that we're getting into the discussions. You shouldn't have to take 4 years to to get to this level of information. It should be possible. But
it's getting better. Eh? I mean, so somebody had to be the first one, and I think we were kind of the first ones. But right now, it's getting more and more. There's more and more awareness that this data exists. We see, for example, in Slovenia, but also in Poland or in Spain. Italy also has absolutely amazing data. Lots of very exciting things happening with it. So it's getting there.
Yeah. How is your methodology being used? Like, does it tailor, or does it need to be tailored? Sorry, does it differ from the different countries? You mentioned 12, I think, perhaps, or 6, or so the methodology remains the same. no matter if you're in Poland, Slovenia, the Netherlands. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So that was exactly the core of the PhD work of both me and the other co-founder, Rusne, that we basically harmonize the data pipeline, that we harmonize the methodology used, so that it's both able to be used in the Netherlands, as in Spain, as in Croatia, as in Slovenia.
And specifically about the data on waste being shipped overseas, it's a huge issue. How hard was it to access that data? And I don't know, I mean, you must have come up against many barriers for that.
Yeah. So again, information is dispersed. There's unfortunately not one central location where this is being stored and collected and reported. So there's a separate, I was talking about these mandatory waste reporting in the beginning, right? So the 67% example. So there's a certain governmental body that is responsible for the national collection of this data, so waste data on the national level, so nothing going over the national border. Then there's, of course, another national governmental body that is responsible for all the international import and export of waste. And then there's a third governmental body or team or department which deals with everything has to do with customs, trades, incoming trade and export and stuff. And so they also have a part of this. So it's, again, very dispersed. It's, again, yeah, not harmonized, but that's basically the work that we did, is trying to have all these different, first of all, governmental departments talking with each other, but also having their data sources talk with each other.
Definitely. And you mentioned one of the charts, or one of the stats you provided, 89%, I think, in Amsterdam, the waste came from companies, 11% from households.
Yeah, but that's very similar in almost every European city that we analyzed. So yeah, sometimes it's 88-12 or 86-14 or 90-10, but it's always this kind of ballpark balance, let's say, which is very interesting. Yeah.
And do you know, is it the similar kind of sectors within these companies, the companies come from, that are producing the most waste in this range of countries, or does it differ from country to country?
Yeah. So that's, like, I think Leona also mentioned this, so like we see the same kind of subdivisions also occurring in different European countries. So about half of this 89% is construction, the construction sector. Construction sector, I mean, I think everybody knows by now that they're like a very big waste producers. That's also something that we see occurring almost everywhere. Yeah.
That's brilliant. Oh no, I could keep on asking questions, but I will pause. And yeah, thank you so much for the presentation, for the questions. I'm going to ask our other speakers to rejoin perhaps the conversation. We've got 17 minutes left of the webinar, and maybe Jacke, I'm going to come to you if you're still around. Yes, perfect. So an opportunity to reflect on what the other speakers have mentioned so far, and also from a question for you, because we've mentioned, Arnold mentioned that almost 50% is construction waste. For EBM, you focus mostly on municipal waste, or how do you sort of tackle this problem whereby the volume is construction, but yeah, we're focusing on other issues, for example? Oh, Jacke, we can't. The sound is gone. No.
Can you hear me now?
Perfect.
Okay. Construction waste, in a sense, is not very helpful as a stream, because first there's the question, are we still counting backfilling as treatment? Because that's just moving soil around, basically, if I simplify it. So lots of volume, but it's locally used, and it doesn't inform much, in a sense. But yeah, we focus on municipal solid waste because I think there is the case where the most can be done. Sure, in the construction sector, even if you discount backfilling, there are still improvements to be done in uptake of recycled and secondary raw materials. But also we have the technology, we have the knowledge. It's maybe a bit of policy work to simplify processes, because it's a mixture of legislation for the mining sector and construction sector and waste sector, and it can get all tangled up. But yeah, construction waste, we mostly focus on construction waste when it comes to mismanaged waste, because this is the most often mismanaged waste in larger quantities that we find in nature, or that is left in nature because the rest is cleaned up. And for construction waste of any amount, you need, mechanization. So it's harder and not as cheap. You can't send volunteers to do it. As far as reflection, of course, I would commend the other speakers. They're doing great initiatives. Our experience with the core, or with the, let's say, raw waste data that is reported, with the waste numbers and all that, is terrible in the sense. We can get it through requests for information and stuff like that, but when we compare what the raw data is and what is reported at the National Statistics Bureau or the Eurostat, you can see discrepancies up to a half, and then you have just a bunch of question marks in your mind. But we followed up with the people to work at the Stats Bureau, and they say that there's so much mistakes in the input side of things that they have a lot of work to do when it comes to yearly reporting, to clean things up, to remove duplications, to remove waste that just pops up somewhere or just disappears somewhere, and that they have a lot of awareness raising, in a sense, to do on the input side of things, because currently it's literally garbage in, garbage out. So each year they have a lot of post-processing to do. They're in the same boat, I guess. So it really impacts platforms like were presented if you rely on that. I hope it's better in other countries, but in Slovenia we have a lot of work to do on this field.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Yeah, okay, about the need for quality sort of data being inputted as well before the analysis starts. Aris, coming to you again, the opportunity to reflect and comment on the other speakers, but I wanted to ask, building on that point, how your work and the metabolism of cities work, how do you tackle this issue of data quality? And sort of the research that you're doing, when question marks are thrown up, how do you sort of overcome those challenges? Do you sort of use the data with a caveat, or do you sort of, other methods to get around this?
Yeah, thanks, Jack. So to build upon what Jaka said, and also the other presentation. So first of all, I love the transparency part of Helsinki and having responsible people at, kind of saying who is responsible for what, and you can contact them to discuss this further. I think the interactivity elements, such as a forum and perhaps even a task manager, so that you can add tasks. So even enable citizens and researchers to join the circularity roadmap voluntarily. I think that would be a great initiative to embark other people as well in this journey, and not silo the efforts of the municipality with, silo then the research and silo the entrepreneurs. I think there's some more joint efforts would be highly beneficial for all. Now, in terms of the data, now we only use open access data because they're freely accessible on the website and anybody can use them. That's a caveat. We've been pondering about having a private parts of the dashboards I showed you, so that anyone can also upload their own and do their own analysis. But so far, we really foster a community, and therefore you have to see it a bit like a Wikipedia of flows from cities. In that sense, within Wikipedia, whenever a contributor says something wrong, where another contributor can come in and then say, well, actually the right quantity is that or this. And this is possible because we know who uploaded what data sets and who also processed it in a way. So first is the person with the glass, the magnifying or the investigator glass that finds the data, collects the data, and then there's another person that actually formats it into the right machine readable format. And you have these two people that are identified, and you can contact them and say, hey, where did you get it? Or are you sure that makes sense and all of this? So we really think that this effort, this data effort, is in all camps has to be solved, right? I mean, we need to collaborate because none of us have all of the cards in our hands. And so we kind of see it as an iterative process. So for instance, for Brussels, I've been studying the metabolism of Brussels for 10 years plus, and I don't know still half of what is happening. And even less other people, because I've written like 300 pages of reports and nobody reads them. But that's the how little we know about cities today. So, but it's still a work in progress, and I think more and more people are interested, and we need to make this research not only accessible, free, of course. But accessible means not only to be able to find it, but accessible means also digestible and usable. And that's where I think the next frontier is, how to make it usable by different people.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a really good point. Thank you, Aris. Leona, coming to you, sort of switching, again, obviously an opportunity to reflect on what the other speakers have mentioned, but a question, Arnold sort of brought up the topic about, I think, 22% of Amsterdam from the work there, or the waste that was identified could be reused. And in the city of Helsinki, how have you sort of got around this topic of classifying waste for reuse or recycling on, and sort of reuse indicators as a whole? It's incredibly important, but also much more difficult to discuss this. So I don't know if you have reflections about how the city is tackling the reuse part of the circular economy in particular as well.
I can actually only answer with regards to demolition waste. This is something that we have been working on. This is a subject also in our roadmap, well in the whole construction sector. We are working on at the moment to create our own operating model in order to reuse different building parts and building materials, either in our own building projects or through selling through our own reuse centers or recycling centers. So this is one thing we are working on. Other than that, with regards to waste management, it's not operated by the city itself. We have this kind of trans-municipal waste management company who takes care of the waste management for several municipalities in the capital region. So that's not actually in our hands directly.
Sure. Yeah, no, it's a common situation. I'm going to maybe pose a similar question to you all to sort of end on, in terms of, okay, if I was, if someone is listening to this webinar, and they're from a city, a municipality in Europe, and they're very interested in this topic, of course, they see the benefits, but unsure where to begin. Leona, coming to you first, and we'll sort of work around from your experiences in Helsinki, how would you help another municipality in Europe sort of get started on their journey to being much more data literate, to sort of using data to better inform policymaking?
Oh, wow, that's a
big question. Sorry,
it's a big question. You need to, like I said, you need to have, don't do it alone, but engage people, get every sector, all the city different sectors engaged, so that they will be, so as to get their commitment, and just I don't know, get a group behind you, and then start planning how to do things. So that's a good starting point. Cooperation. So yeah, to get it short, it's that's a big question.
Exactly. No, apologies for coming to us and putting you on the spot, but that's a really good point. It can't be done alone, and I think you need sort of capacity, but you also need the right people with the right information and access away from the traditional silos, perhaps. And Arno, perhaps a similar question to you in terms of, from your experience, and to really digging down on this. Again, sort of any sort of guidance about where to begin, or sort of what is the most important areas to focus on from a municipal, local authority level?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the point has already been brought up, I think, by every speaker, the point of data collection issues, the point of data quality issues. I think, yeah, I would like to reiterate as well, like what Leona said. I think find your local champions, or find your governmental champions who are also willing to embark on this on this experiment together with you to see what is possible with the data that is out there. How bad the quality might be or how incomplete it might be, it will never be as you wish what it is, but at least start from something. And then I think it's very important. I think Jaka, the issues that he has been facing with regards to getting the right data, there's always somebody who wants to believe in it as well, or who is also on the good side of things. So find those people within local governments, national governments who want to embark on this mission together with you. It's exactly actually also what Metabolism of Cities is, right? A network of champions of champions around the world who try to fight a good cause. So I would say that's like a very important parameter of success. And then secondly, I would say don't reinvent the wheel. I think there's a lot of research and work and data methodologies already out there. I think Aristide's database and website is also a very good example of this. Don't try to like figure it out all by yourself or hire some kind of bullshit expensive consultancy firm to do it. There's so much good work already out there in the open source community. Start from there, and I think you will get much further and much better results like this.
Thanks for that. Wonderful words. Jaka, coming to you, but slightly different question. For those joining this webinar and listening, if you work for a local community organization, an NGO, or sort of you're an individual, what could you do from your experience as EBM to help municipalities begin their journey as well? Sort of twisting this question a bit, what guidance about, if you're not involved in the political process formally, what can you do to help really speed this along? I think you're on mute, sorry.
I would focus on the fact that without data, we don't know where we are. So if the municipality is already committed to achieving something, if they don't track progress, you can never know whether you're successful or not. So I would focus advocacy on that front, but also, as others mentioned, capacity can be a problem. So maybe you don't have capacity yourself, maybe the municipality doesn't have capacity, but there are other civil society organizations that are just for, I don't know, open source or open knowledge or open science, open data geeks. You can, if you really wanted to start and you just know that, yeah, there's probably some good to be had in the data ecosystem, but I have no clue about it. I would, either as a municipality or as the civil society organization, I would try to organize a datathon, just, okay, we'll open some data, we'll allow it and let the community see if they can find any value within it, get the common wisdom outside. And then once you've done that, then you can maybe consider consulting and bigger initiatives and full-on systems and all these technical complications that really can otherwise bog you down in the details.
Yeah, fantastic. And Aris, final words to you. Either feel free to answer this question about where municipalities can get started, or in general, reflections about where is all this going in terms of, the focus of the webinar is about zero-waste cities and how to empower them. And from your work, are you seeing the general sort of direction of travel here in the coming years in terms of interest, focus areas? And you also have 1 minute to answer this, which is almost impossible.
Thanks. Well, it's been our mission to do exactly that. So to simplify things for cities. So build open source and free tools, leave all of the heavy infrastructure of data and do not build it from scratch. We already have it covered for you, or at least a part of it, and also through the podcast to interview other cities that have started already, listen to other cities because they have faced already the same challenges, and it's always the same administrations that go through it. Like it's the waste administration, the environmental administration, the economic one, and it's always this type of constellation that drives circular economy and has some type of interesting data. So just do that and don't just start small. Iterate very in a rapid pace and fail a lot of times, but be open with it with a wider community. So there's a lot of intrapreneurs like Leona that we need within cities to kickstart this process, and please contact universities. They're like kind of free allies that you have, and that they're very eager to work for city problems, to make their time be, you know, impactful, and to work on something that matters, and not only to, you know, abstract science. So yeah, I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, most definitely. Most definitely. So thank you. We've run out of time, but yes, just a final big thank you to our speakers. Arno, Aris, Jakob, the owner of such an interesting and expert sort of overview of data and how we can help empower cities. Thank you all the participants for joining. Yes, there will be the Zero Waste Cities website. We have a specific tools page where we'll sort of upload the speakers' presentations afterwards for you to access. You can also sign up to the newsletter where you'll get more information about further webinars coming up in the future. For example, we have one on the 11th of February actually on recycling in Europe. How can we fix and amend the broken system? Where we'll talk a lot about data and the question marks over the quality of it. So yes, thank you all again to our excellent speakers. Thank you for joining today, listening in. I hope you enjoyed it. And we look forward to welcoming you next time to a webinar. But enjoy the rest of your day wherever you are, and speak soon. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.